Hi students, welcome to lesson number 15 on displacement. Now the introduction. Displacement has become widely recognized as the most difficult issue for floating in industrial development projects around the world. Nearly 90 million sons and daughters of the soil have been relocated globally as a result of the construction of big dams and industrial projects. In India, it is estimated that 42 million people have been displaced by contemporary temples, that is in India's country study report 2000. Scholarly unofficial assessments suggest an inconceivable concealed disparity between the estimated and actual number of displaced people. According to the World Bank review, the number of people displaced surpasses the original estimate by about 6,25,000 out of 192 projects evaluated. Indeed, it is now well accepted that underestimating data is a rule rather than exception, according to China Report 1999 and Macaulay 1996. This is unquestionably ample justification for seeing a sad irony and possibly purpose in the lack of solid government statistics on the number of individuals displaced. However, displacement, relocation and rehabilitation are more than a matter of numbers or the lack thereof. Empowerment, post-rehabilitation, human rights of projects, participants' involvement and self-determination in development, the complexities of relocation goals, options and methods and appropriate legal and policy instruments are all important considerations in the displacement process. And the objectives of these lessons are that the students will be able to understand what exactly is displacement. They can also describe the major consequences of displacement, and they can also analyze how displacement disrupts the life of the affected people. What is displacement? Displacement is the forced relocation of existing residents and businesses was once a desired outcome of the urban renewal projects of the 20th century. In the 21st century, displacement is a highly contested, hard to trace effect commonly linked to gentrification and urban revitalization. It is defined as the involuntary relocation of current residents or businesses. In contemporary times, displacement is often confused with gentrification. But while displacement can result from gentrification, it is critical to maintain clear distinction between the two. In the contemporary times, displacement can result from any of a number of possible scenarios, that is foreclosures, eviction, rent increases, negligent landlords and environmental catastrophe. For example, in the past, slum clearance, urban renewal, interstate highway system construction and stadium construction created waves of displacement, some of which actually was an intended outcome of urban planning projects. There is now a large body of evidence that displacement introduces extreme risk for those forced to leave their homes and places of businesses. The effect of displacement can include homelessness, loss of community and loss of access to jobs and mobility. Displaced low-income residents often move to neighborhoods with fewer resources for economic advancement and quality of life. Moreover, displacement tends to create disparate impacts. or what are the impacts of displacement? The impacts of displacement can be mainly divided into two broad categories. One, it is positive, and next it is negative. The positive impacts of displacement, however, affect only a minuscule section of the affected community and comprise of impacts such as: first one, a few persons may experience improvement in their status by way of increase in the size of land holdings. Second, a rise in income may occur in certain cases by the employment opportunities created by the projects. Third, a break in some oppressive social hierarchies may also result. And the negative impacts of displacements are that, however, majorities of the displaced people undergo a process of dispossession and disempowerment. As an outcome of the process of development, displacement has the potential to dismantle and destroy villages as well as socio-economic and cultural structures of the inhabitants. When people are forcibly removed from their habitat, the following situations arises, like the production systems get dismantled, productive assets and income sources get lost, people get relocated to environments where their productive skills may be less applicable and the competition for resources is greater. Long established residential groups get disorganized, kinship groups get scattered, informal social networks and safety nets are broken, and thus by its very nature, displacement in general and involuntary displacement in particular is a disruptive and painful process. Economically and culturally, it creates high risk of chronic types of impoverishment among the displaced people. Michael Kearney's model is one of the most talked about among the countless anthropological, sociological and geographical research done to separate the main processes that occur when people are forcibly moved. He identified an 8-point pattern of interconnected tendencies. They make up the model of the whole impoverishment process. The heart of the displacement, according to Kearney, 1995, is the development-induced impoverishment of some population groups. These prospective threats can be turned into actual poverty disaster if effective counteractive action is not implemented in a timely manner, and they are marginalization, food insecurity, mortality, social disarticulation, landlessness, joblessness, homelessness, loss of common property. This model reflects the fact that displaced individuals lose natural capital, man-made capital, human capital and social capital in addition to economic and cultural poverty. The 8 sub-processes that converge into impoverishment listed may be the only ones, but they are the most essential. They occur in varying degrees of intensity in different regions. The effects of displacement, on the other hand, are not evenly distributed between communities and districts. They differ depending on the social, economic and cultural setting. This occurs because rural and urban communities are not homogeneous by nature, but rather are coalitions of many different social groupings, uneven power and resources. Now, we will understand the impact of displacement in various aspects, and one among them is the dispossession in the economic sphere. The economic consequences of development-induced displacement are clearly visible, like landlessness and disruptive changes in landholding patterns, joblessness and vocational shifts, homelessness and other negative consequences such as loss of access to CPRs, loss of livelihood and poverty and food insecurity among the issues that displaced people confront. First one is landlessness and change in land holding pattern. It is one of the most common forms of dispossession that occurs as a result of rural displacement, which is the loss of land and changes in land ownership patterns. Expropriation of land undermines the very foundation of people's production system, commercial activities and livelihoods. To put it another way, land loss causes individuals to lose their agricultural and homestead land, which offers food and economic stability to a huge number of Indians. If these livelihood systems are not repaired or replaced with stable income generating work, landlessness and destitution will result. The risk of landlessness affects different sorts of people, socio-economic groups and villages in different ways. Second dispossession is joblessness and occupational shift. Another form of economic dispossession experienced by a displaced person is a loss of paid employment and a shift in occupational pattern. It can happen in both urban and rural areas. In the process of joblessness and occupational transition, various groups of people are involved. To begin with, there are farmers who have lost their farming potential due to land loss, which can lead to joblessness and poverty if alternative livelihood systems are not supplied. Employed landless rural and urban people lose out in three ways as a result of this process. The first one, they lose work on land owned by others as well as leased or sharecrop land. Second, they lose job opportunities primarily in the urban area, and third, they lose access to assets under the common property regime. And those without assets of land, on the other hand, are the most vulnerable during the displacement process. And this is due to the fact that neither state regulations nor R&R programs make specific allowances for these groups. Most of the time, they aren't labeled as ousties. Even the few jobs that some ousties acquire in a project after being displaced are low wage and frequently transitory. Vocational training for displaced peoples and PAPs can help them gain skills, but does not guarantee employment. Another aspect is homelessness. Most displaced people lose or loss of house and shelter is only temporary. This period can be quite protracted and stressful. After being evacuated, displaced persons are frequently forced to live in substandard housing, making life extremely tough for them. Another dispossession is loss of access to common property resources. The oustees, particularly the CPR dependents, suffer economic, social and cultural dispossession and impoverishment, and as a result of the loss of common property resources. CPRs have long been a crucial source of basic subsistence for impoverished households in rural India, particularly landless and other assetless people, including women. A poor household's resources include fruit and other edible forest produce, firewood and dead wood for use and sale, common grazing grounds, use of public quarries, medicinal herbs. As a result, the loss of CPRs result in significant income loss or degradation, particularly for the poor. CPRs are also critical for the future of tribal evictees, especially in terms of their cultural knowledge, which is closely linked to natural resources. For example, tribal people rely on natural resources to produce medicine and a range of food crops, as well as organic pesticides and manure, herbicides and beverages. One of the concerns associated with displacement has been the loss of this rich indigenous knowledge system due to dwindling resources, environmental degradation and the loss of those who hold generations worth of traditional knowledge. Communities' knowledge, lore and skills must be preserved not just in the former villages and surrounding forest, but also in resettlement sites, farms and water bodies. One of the options for such conservation is starting of botanical gardens and herbariums before displacement and transplanting and rehabilitation sites. All this would not only help to prevent the traditional skills from extinction, but also assist to stem the process of impoverishment. Another problem is loss of livelihood and impoverishment. Impoverishment is a loss of essential sources of subsistence, resulting in a fall in the economic position of the displaced. Landlessness, unemployment and homelessness are all signs of the marginalization process. It indicates that the loss of land, productive assets and a means of subsistence has resulted in downward mobility. It occurs when a family's economic strength is not totally restored. Middle income farm households do not become landless as a result of this process. Instead, they become tiny landholders. Even if they do not become landless, families who were formerly precariously perched above the poverty line fall below it and never fully recover. Some farms may become economically unviable as a result of the partial but significant loss of family land to highways or canals in the case of agricultural families. Despite the fact that high productive farmers with fertile soil may be awarded some land, they may suffer economic viability issues. So, this process of impoverishment is frequently viewed through the lens of generalized loss of livelihood. However, it is critical to pay special attention to the plight of women as well. And this is due to the fact that land acquisition and displacement have a direct negative influence on their family and community standing. Women in tribal communities, for example, play an essential role in the subsistence economy based on shifting cultivation, permanent agriculture and access to non-timber resources. With displacement and loss of land, women lose the economic autonomy they once enjoyed and become totally subjugated to male domination. Children are a particularly vulnerable category in this displacement process. Schooling is frequently disrupted by displacement and relocation, and some children never return to schools. Many children are drafted into labor market sooner than they would have been otherwise after displacement due to a loss in family income. The girl child may be more vulnerable than the boy youngster. Under such situation, she would be one of the first to be asked to do her part in decreasing the level of food insecurity that the family would encounter. Another impact is food insecurity. A loss of land, livelihood and availability to non-timber produce all contribute to food insecurity. Food production declines and harvests are lost as a result of displacement, particularly during the transition from the old to the new site. Furthermore, it may take years to re-establish food production capabilities at the new location. These losses have an impact on food production, availability and consumption patterns. It leads to food insecurity, which is defined as protein intake levels significantly below the bare minimum required for appropriate growth and work. Food insecurity rises during the pre-monsoon season when food intake among the landless is low and resettlement is common. Displacement also leads to changes in dietary intake in the household, and that may adversely affect the nutrition level, more specifically of children and women. Another impact of displacement is seen in the social, cultural, political and psychological spheres. Displacement leads to dispossession not only in the economic but also in the social, cultural and political spheres. It takes various forms such as social disorganization, low self-esteem, loss of identity, loss of health, loss of culture and of political institutions, each of which are clearly explained with the help of examples. All these leads to the marginalization of the 𝗬𝗎𝗓𝗔. Studies conducted by Prasad, Kothari and Bhattari, Vegas and Menon, Gandhi and Ajit Kumar revealed the social, cultural and psychological dimensions of the lives of the 𝗬𝗎𝗓𝗔s under consideration while planning rehabilitation measures. And first dimension is social disorganization. With the kind of changes brought about by the displacement process, social disorder occurs. These factors have resulted in significant changes in the social structure of groups in general and tribal culture in particular. It is possible that their family life will be interrupted. Traditional social control system may be degraded, if not eliminated entirely. As a result, social tensions may rise, and in addition, social support networks are prone to disintegration, which has far-reaching ramifications for the community. Social networks frequently assist people in overcoming poverty through individualized techniques such as informal loans, the trade of food, clothing and durable commodities, and mutual assistance with farming, house construction and child care. The loss of such multifunctional yet almost invisible social networks as a result of displacement is a hidden but major cause of poor. Such losses are more common in programs that distribute people rather than in social groups and units. It is quite difficult for the 𝗬𝗎𝗓𝗔 to recreate similar social structure and networks in such situation. Another impact is the loss of self-esteem and identity. Often the development projects 𝗬𝗎𝗓𝗔s experience loss of self-esteem as individuals and as communities when confronted with development and modernization. The loss of the moral worth and dignity of a village community can be substantial and as well as socially crippling. And another impact is the loss of culture and religion. The 𝗬𝗎𝗓𝗔s also fear losing their cultural and religious customs as a result of their displacement. They lose their cultural autonomy and their fundamental identity is jeopardized as a result. As a result, they are attacked in every aspect of their lives, from language to marital rituals to religion. The religious ethos, which is tightly related to their environment and socio-agrarian institution, is gradually crumbling. The community festivals, which used to be so important in people's lives, have lost their value. And another impact is a loss of political institution. In the political domain, dispossession occurs as a result of the so-called national polities political integration process. As a result, traditional political system and institution progressively become outdated. The displaced people are assimilated into the state and are required to follow and integrate into the so-called mainstream political system. And another impact is psychological. And research has shown that displacement and dislocation causes special cultural, economic and technical problems. Studies have shown that a feeling of alienation, helplessness and powerlessness is instilled in those uprooted. Social cohesion is weakened and increased psychological stress diminishes the initiative and capacity for collective action of those affected. Displacement may also lead to social anomie and emotional disorders. Many indicators of such anomie such as alcoholism, crime, suicides, prostitution, delinquency and despair may go up. Another effect is the dispossession in the environmental and health spheres. Displacement as a result of development creates plenty of issues in the areas of the environment and health. Large-scale industrial development may result in air and noise pollution, while large-scale evacuation to another region may result in epidemics and other dangerous ailments. And the first is the environmental impact, where the availability and use of drinking water supply and drainage infrastructure have a big impact on the environment. Inadequate solid waste disposal, air and noise pollution and other environmental risks can result in several problems for displaced people and the environment. Next, it is lack of health or loss of health. Displacement has a negative impact on the community's health, which is a sensitive measure of progress. It has also been observed that those who were forced to migrate are more exposed to sickness and are exposed to illness that is comparatively more severe than those who are not. Displacement has negative health consequences, especially when initiatives do not include preventive epidemiological measures. The direct and secondary effects of involuntary displacement without preventive health measures range from diarrhea and dysentery to parasite and vector-borne disease, including malaria and other epidemics caused by unsafe, insufficient water source and inadequate sanitary waste system. The conceptualization of socio-economic impact studies on displacement. Initially, the aforementioned socio-economic implications were considered as unimportant side effects of growth-driven development. However, since the mid-1970s, there has been increasing public awareness of the varied negative consequences of displacement. And the following are the main reasons behind this shift. And the first one is that, for starters, some development projects have failed to meet the goal of human progress, and these failures were primarily due to the project's sociological ignorance and ill-conceived design. Second, it is there was a progressive shift in how people saw the term development. Questions such as who will benefit the most from the development process are now being raised. Third concern is there was growing worry about the negative societal impact of huge projects in general. There was also an increase in public concern about the environmental impact as well as for environmental protection, sustainable development, participation and institution creation. The country's public outcry over development funds wasted on half-baked schemes and ineffective interventions. Finally, the impacted people's perception began to shift. They grew more knowledgeable about their rights and government programs, and as a result, they began to seek their rights as a group. Surprisingly, despite this growing awareness, there remains a significant gap in the planning of effective resettlement and rehabilitation programs. An environmental assessment, for example, is frequently carried out prior to the start of a project. However, doing a socio-economic impact assessment prior to the start of a project is frequently overlooked. The various studies, it was discovered that the idea of treating displaced person as second-class citizen is still prevalent, as seen by project township on the one hand and rehabilitation colonies on the other. While townships have wide roads, large houses and gardens with all the amenities, rehabilitation colonies are sometimes congested with relatively small buildings and facilities. To summarize, displacement has both positive as well as negative consequences. The negative effects, on the other hand, tend to outweigh the favorable ones. It is primarily due to the fact that the vast majority of displaced individuals are subjected to a process of dispossession and disempowerment. To put it another way, the oustees are in danger of becoming impoverished and losing their homes. The risk that the oustees suffer include not only the economic perils of displacement, but also the social, cultural, political, psychological and environmental consequences. We have also noticed that various persons have different reactions to the process of relocation. The most vulnerable people, such as the landless, rural and urban poor, tribals, women and children, are the ones that suffer the most. There have been instances where people have completely lost their source of income. To mitigate the negative effect of displacement, the resettlement practitioner must assist the ousted by organizing resettlement in such a way that the capital is restored in all of its forms. This emphasizes the importance of conducting a comprehensive socio-economic effect review prior to the start of a project, as well as complicated preventive and recovery program during the relocation process.